you sleepy, get rub your eyes, get out of bed. Ding dong, she's gone where the goblins go. Below, below, below your hole, let's dance and laugh and sing and ring the bell. I go the merry-o, sing it high, sing it low. Let 'em all, 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 let 'em all know she's dead.
Kia ora and welcome to Baha'i On Air. Anyone who has kept an eye on the music charts lately has noticed an interesting trend. Jazz has been on the resurgence, with artists like Norah Jones and Diana Krall hitting the charts. Recently, an American international news program did an item on this resurgence of jazz and focused in on one of the rising stars of the jazz vocal scene, Tierney Sutton.
In a Los Angeles recording studio, Tierney Sutton got together recently with instrumentalists and a producer to craft a new album of songs she hoped would be a breakthrough to jazz stardom.
Tierney Sutton is in New Zealand to perform with New Zealand Symphony Orchestra, together with well-known Kiwi conductor and arranger Alan Broadbent, in concerts in Auckland, Wellington and Christchurch.
No matter how I may pretend, I know that you alone can end.
Baha'i On Air is very fortunate to have Tierney Sutton with us in this episode. Welcome to New Zealand and welcome to Baha'i On Air, Tierney.
Thank you, Guy.
It's a pleasure to have you on our show. I thought we would start off by talking about jazz, because jazz is what's brought you to New Zealand. And obviously your career has been based on jazz and jazz singing. And I think most of our audience doesn't know or wouldn't have a clear idea of what jazz is. What does it cover?
Well, it's kind of a controversial thing. I think people have a variety of different definitions for jazz, but most frequently when I'm asked about what jazz is or what jazz singing is, my definition is that a jazz singer is always singing within a given context. In the Baha'i writings it says that you should concern yourselves with the needs of the time in which you live. And I think there's a metaphor here in terms of what jazz is. That you don't sing always what you want to sing. You adjust to context in terms of harmony, in terms of rhythm, in terms of tempo, in all ways, pitch, everything. And so a jazz singer, to me, the greatest jazz singers that I can think of, Sarah Vaughan, Ella Fitzgerald, Carmen McRae, they always sang within the context of the harmony and the rhythm and had a very profound understanding of all of those things.
That sounds like a very broad definition of what jazz is.
I guess to think of it this way, if you're a classical singer or a Broadway singer, your main responsibility is to sing the melody as written.
Right.
And for the most part, in those kinds of contexts, a singer will sing and the pianist will follow the singer, or the band will follow the singer. They're responsible to sing that melody the same each time. And if the tempo changes or the pianist decides to throw a different chord in, it will be very jarring for that singer, because they're used to thinking in a very sort of horizontal way, singing that melody. But a jazz singer is always hearing all the notes in the chord. Every note, not just the melody note, that is the common note, but hearing all of it and having access to all of that harmony in a given moment. And therefore being very free about if the tempo changes or the mood changes, being able to do that.
Mm-hmm. So it's about flexibility and adaptation and context.
Right.
Ding dong, the witch is dead, a witch, oh witch, the wicked witch. Ding dong, the wicked old witch is dead. Wake up, you sleepy hair of your eyes, get out of bed. Ding dong, the wicked old witch
Yeah, that's fine.
I guess most people, perhaps until 5 or so years ago, the general public would, when they think of jazz, they might think of Louis Armstrong or Duke Ellington or some of those sorts of names from the past, and then more recently, people like Norah Jones have perhaps sort of brought a jazz element into popular music, and so that's sort of broadened out our conception of what jazz is. Are there different sort of categories? Can you categorize jazz in different ways into different schools of style or something?
I like to be terribly careful about that. I mean, thinking of Louis Armstrong and Duke Ellington is a fabulous place to be. I mean, they are examples of absolute masters of the form. And I think it's fair to say that most serious students of jazz study those people, you know, as heroes and masters. So there is that element. But at the same time, throughout pop music, when I was growing up in the 70s and 80s, there were lots of pop performers that were very influenced by jazz and had that kind of contextual mastery that I'm talking about. Stevie Wonder is very rooted in jazz and is a great jazz musician when he cares to be. And the same with Steely Dan and all sorts of kind of, I would say, kind of more advanced pop musicians tended to have a jazz element, a true jazz element, improvised solos and a more profound understanding of harmony.
And there's been quite a lot of cross-fertilization, hasn't there? There's been sort of Miles Davis doing the sort of more rock thing and vice versa.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, you know, when I think of artists like Pat Metheny, who I think is brilliant, you know, bringing those elements of contemporary music and contemporary thought into what you're doing. You know, I'm not a big purist about those things. I think that people have to do what's sincere for them. But at the same time, if you love something, you want to achieve excellence in it. There's several purposes that have to be served. One is I need to sit down. And the second that's even more important is that you have to see my great shoes. So, right now I want us to pretend that we're not in a concert hall, we're in a little smoky jazz club. I'm here to tell you that Alan has spent a little time in such places. Now and then. So, I'm taking a load off, and we're going to do this tune.
Oh, you and the night and the music fill me with flaming desire, setting my being completely on fire. Oh, you and the night and the music thrill me, but will we be one after the night and the music are done? Until the pale light of dawning and daylight, our hearts will be throbbing guitars. Morning may come without warning and take away the stars. But if we must live for the moment, love till the moment is through. After the night and the music die, will I have you? And the night and the music fill me with flaming desire, setting my being completely on fire. You and the night and the music thrill me, but will we be one after the night and the music are done? Until the pale light of dawning and daylight, our hearts will be throbbing guitars. Morning may come without warning and take away the stars. If we must live for the moment, up till the moment is through. After the night and the music die, will I have you? Broadbent. You and the night and the music filled me with flaming desire, setting my being completely on fire. You and the night and the music through me, but will we be one after the night and the music are done? Until the pale light of dawning and daylight, our hearts will be throbbing guitars. Morning may come without warning and take away the stars. But if we must live for the moment, love till the moment is through. After the night and the music die, will I have you? 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 Putter Smith, Frank Gibson, and of course Alan Broadbent.
Okay, how would you categorize yourself or your own style? Or would you at all? Or do you just sort of go with where the mood takes you at each
You
time?
know, I guess I'll go back to the idea of context in that I am very fortunate that I've been able to sing with great musicians. You know, here in New Zealand, I'm performing with Alan Broadbent, he's a genius. I mean, I don't use it lightly. He's one of the greatest living arrangers of any style. And when people experience his symphonic arrangements, they're just breathtaking. So if I'm singing in that context, I'm trying to give honor to the work that he's done and be a part of that.
When all the clouds are a hopeless jumble and the raindrops tumble to the ground, heaven opens a magic lane. When all the clouds darken up the skyway, there's a rainbow highway to be found. Leading from your window pane to a place beyond the sun. Just a step beyond the rain. Somewhere over the rainbow, way up high, there the dreams that you dare to dream really do come true. Someday I'll wish upon a star and wake up where the clouds are far behind, where troubles melt like lemon drops away above the chimney tops. That's where you find somewhere over the rainbow. Birds fly over the rainbow. Why then, oh, why can't I? Let happy little bluebirds fly beyond the rainbow. Why, why can't I? In my band, we just completed our 5th CD together, and we arrange everything as a cooperative. We collaborate on the arrangements and have an equal voice. We use a consultative process in every arrangement that we do. So when I look at my style and what I do, when I started singing, I fell in love with Miles Davis and John Coltrane and Nancy Wilson and a lot of the great classic jazz artists. But as I surrounded myself with great musicians, I take lots of elements from those musicians and from the music that I listen to. So I like to think that my style and the style of my band is our thing. You know, it's unique to us, as I think any improvisational musician with a group of people is unique to that group and to that moment.
Okay, so again, it's about context, it's about sort of interrelationships,
Right.
and that evolves and changes.
Right.
These days, Tierney Sutton is trying to get the job done her way, but she recognizes the debt she owes the jazz greats of the past. Her latest album is a tribute to Frank Sinatra, who for her was an acquired taste.
Somebody loves you. It's no good unless he loves you.
She had to do a lot of listening before she understood her legendary predecessor and was ready to pay tribute. But when she assembled with the other musicians in the studio, it was time to forget the research and react to what others were doing. Improvise.
That's how deep it goes, if it's real. Somebody loves you.
Each take received a lively critique during the playback.
We're talking with Tierney Sutton, a very talented jazz singer who is in New Zealand to perform with the New Zealand Symphony Orchestra. Tierney, is this your first time to New Zealand?
Yes, I've never been here before.
Had you heard anything about New Zealand? Had you heard of New Zealand before you came?
I had heard quite a bit about New Zealand, and what I've told a lot of Kiwis since I've been here, and it's absolutely true, is that the flat-out majority of people that I told I was coming to New Zealand, who had traveled here and who had traveled extensively, said that New Zealand was the one place that was their favorite or that they wanted to move to. So I think the only problem with New Zealand is that everyone is falling in love with it, and people will start to have to park their cars a greater distance away from their destination and deal with what the rest of the world that's overpopulated has to deal with. So, you know, I think that the reputation of New Zealand internationally is stellar. I mean, people think of it as one of the most wonderful places on the planet.
I thought it would be helpful for us to think about your life and where you've come from and sort of what brought you to this career path, what brought you to jazz.
I became a Baha'i in 1981, and when I was in university, I decided that because the foundational principle of the Baha'i faith is the oneness of mankind, I decided that I would study Russian language and literature. So I have a degree in Russian language and literature.
And was your intention to go to Russia at that time?
Yeah, or translate or something. At that time, it was the end of the Cold War, and there were more teachers of English in the former Soviet Union than there were students of Russian in the United States. So there was this huge gap. And during that period, I discovered jazz. And when I discovered jazz, I realized that it was a style of music that was so attractive to me and seemed on some level so naturally how I approached music, even though I was, you know, very uneducated and had so much to learn and still have so much to learn. There was something about it that felt very natural to me.
Did you have some kind of musical background before that? You say you discovered jazz. You must have been aware of jazz generally in the...
No.
No?
I mean, that's one of the things that kind of annoys me when I think about it, because I really knew nothing of jazz until I was 19 or 20.
Wow.
And I sang in choirs and classical music and musicals and, you know, sang other people's pop songs, and none of it really, I liked it, and I had a reasonably good voice and all, but I wasn't compelled to really pursue it. And then when I discovered jazz, and I said, oh, you know, the theme and variation, because that's the essence of jazz is theme and variation. And I didn't know that that was something that people did, you know, in some kind of structured form.
I say I'll move the mountains, and I'll move the mountains. the sky. Crazy calls me, sure I'm crazy, crazy in loving mine. Oh, the difficult I will do right now. The impossible may take a little while. I say I'll care forever, and I'll care forever if I have to hold up the sky. Crazy calls me, sure I'm crazy, crazy in love am I. Crazy in love am I.
We hope you will join us next time for more conversation with American jazz singer Tierney Sutton and more of her music at the Auckland Town Hall with Alan Broadbent and the New Zealand Symphony Orchestra. Thank you for choosing Baha'i on Air.
Sing it high.